Welcome to a land full of otherworldly wonders, encapsulated by astonishing landscapes, home to 9 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, rich in biodiversity, found only here. The birthplace of ancient cultures, and unique in every way. Welcome to the cradle of humankind. From the most ancient remains of hominids to the spectacular stelae of Axum. From the churches at Lalibela carved from solid rock, with monumental remains dating back to the mythical reign of the Queen of Sheba, the cultural and natural heritage of Ethiopia is incredibly rich. This nation is also Africa's second fastest growing economy and changing rapidly. The race is on to preserve Ethiopia's unique cultural heritage through groundbreaking research and community archaeology. Situated in Northeast Africa, Ethiopia is one of the countries where the oldest remains of hominids, the earliest human ancestors, were found, where humankind started to use the first stone tools, and perhaps were the first to master fire. The probable site of the mythical land of Punt, and the ancient source of incense. Ethiopia has one of the oldest Christian and Muslim traditions in the world, yet this country, where over 80 different languages are spoken, remains very diverse. It's now November and December, northern Ethiopia's dry season. 2 months of intense archaeological research begins for the archaeologists of UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles. They start their work with students from the Institute for Field Research and the local community. They have a short period of 2 months to learn as much as possible about the historically rich area before the rainy season begins.
We are dealing with this big riddle. We have a very fertile area in Northeast Africa, and archaeologists thought there was nothing there. Ethiopia is very famous for its early hominids. Lucy was 3.2 million years, give or take. It's the out of Africa story. And then we have a lot of evidence for the Aksumite Kingdom, which is 1st century BC, 5th century AD. What happened in between in those millions of years? So there is a kind of gap. That is the riddle we're trying to solve. And I talked to colleagues because I'm interested especially in the late Stone Age, but also the Middle Stone Age. And people said, well, there is no evidence. Maybe there was nobody living in the highlands of Ethiopia at that time. And I thought, that's impossible. There must have been. So we have archaeologists going out and basically looking at the surface, finding these clues in the landscape. How people use the landscape, what were they doing there. That's what our research focuses on.
Ethiopia is known for the Paleolithic remains of early humankind and for the Axum Kingdom. But until recently, there was little information for the thousands of years in between. It was even thought that the Ethiopian highlands may have been devoid of population during the Middle and Late Stone Age. The team thinks this very unlikely. The people of Shire, 60 kilometers west of famous Axum, were always told in school that history happened elsewhere. Earlier remains from the Aksumite Kingdom in the 1st to 10th centuries AD was called pre-Aksumite and thought to be strongly under the influence from South Arabia. The archaeology team intends to prove that the Shire region has its own history and development Very different from, for instance, the pre-Aksumite remains at Yeha, where a temple was dedicated to a South Arabian moon god. Every year, the team adds more exciting information on what really was happening in this spectacular region.
We Ethiopians have a lot of history, but not yet investigated very well and not yet documented very well. Tigray is the cradle of ancient Ethiopian civilization. So if we get this brand name in northern part of Ethiopia, which is Tigray, we have also untouched archaeological sites which are gone by the public. So archaeology is very important. The local communities will be benefit from its own history, from its own heritage.
There's 40.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
The project has a great dream to explore the northern part of the history. Also, not only the history, not only on paper, we have planned also to conserve the cultural heritages for sustainability purpose, for tourism industry.
Okay, so hold it here. Okay, so I think this should be the point. So right here, yeah, okay.
We should come, we should explore more, we should excavate more, we should tell the story more to the public, which is hidden underground. I want to see the local communities beneficial from their history, from their heritage. If the local communities are beneficiary, the regional government will be beneficiary, the country will be beneficiary, the continent will be beneficiary, then the globe will be also beneficiary.
For many archaeologists, like Gede, northern Ethiopia is considered one of the world's most important archaeological regions that must be protected from devastating activities such as urban development and illegal mining.
This area of Mai Adrasha is extremely rich. We have at least 4 big town sites here, and we work with the local people, which is extremely important because these are people, many of whom have actually been panning gold in the region.
Well, the gold mining in here, it's part of like the disaster, or one of the reasons that people were interested in the site, not just for the gold, but for the kind of materials or tools that they found in this site. So anything that has that kind of mineral or any kind of historical importance would mean it has something that could be commercial in this site. And people in this area, as I said before, do not have the kind of broader understanding of what archaeology is. That's why we are doing the public outreach.
The trouble is that on the one hand, they know this site as a source for gold retrieval. On the other hand, these are people who know their soil. They've been farmers here all their lives. They know the region, they know what the composition is of the soil. So working with them, we can actually explain that what we are interested in is not the gold, but is the relationship between the soil and the architecture, and between the soil and the things we find in there, the ceramics, the flint, the botanical remains. So for us, it's not so much about the things, but about the information.
It's not only the gold, but also, you know, now you can see the town expanding, which is also a big issue in here. You have small villages growing up everywhere, so they need infrastructure for that, and they dig, they quarry stones, and you have lots of population coming to these towns who needs these gold areas to be exploited. So archaeologically we have a lot to do on this area, yeah.
We are in a kind of battle on two fronts. We are very limited in time. We can only go out there for 2 months a year. We have to work in the dry season, but also we work in an area that is in development with population growth, with agriculture expanding and with mining, especially mining for gold. And that has happened for a long time in the last decade. So people are just excavating the soil and panning it out to find tiny, tiny flecks of gold. Now, for them, that gold, of course, is a contribution to their income, but what they're destroying is so much more valuable. We can only excavate something once, and what we're interested in is the relationship between the soil and the architecture, the things we find in the soil. We can only explain what was going on if we have that intact. So explaining that to the local population is extremely important. And working with the population is building the trust.
እንታይ እሞ ክገልፆ እዚስ ብጣዕሚ ጽቡቕ እዩ በቃ እንትናይ ቅድሚ ሕጂ ዝነበረ ወለዶ እንታይነት ምዃኑ ንኽንፈልጥ ንሶም ፈሊጦሞስ ንዓና ንኸፍልጡና በቃ ጽቡቕ እየ ዝብሎ ብትሕተይ እውን ኣለዉ መናእሰይ ዝፈልጥዎ ታሪክ ካልኦት ህፃውንቲ እውን ዝፈልጥዎ ታሪክ የብዝዩ ወፂኒ ንቐጻላይ ማለት እዩ ሕጂ ኸይኮነ ንቐጻላይ ቅድሚ ሕጂ ኣይተፈልጠን ነይሩ ኣነ ንባዕለይ እውን ኣይፈልጠን ነይረ ካይፈለጥኩዎ እየ ናብ ካሊእ ኸይደ ሕጂ ግን ከምዚ የሎ ተባሂሉ ብእዝነይ ሰሚዐስ ብዓይነይ ኳሪአዮ ጽቡቕ እዩ ደስ ዝብል እዩ
Now the good thing about these people is that they really know their soil. They are farmers. They know what the properties of the soil are. They know when there are changes. And for archaeology that's fundamental. From the very beginning I decided we should pay attention to what they have to tell us. We should give credit where credit is due. So they are not workmen or day laborers, they are our excavators. They actually teach the supervisors and the students how to excavate, how to recognize soil, how to deal with this very, very difficult soil. It's very hard, it's compact, there's very subtle differences and they know how to tease it out. They're an incredible resource.
Community archaeology in Ethiopia involves collaborative efforts that focus on listening to the concerns, opinions, and aspirations of the community.
ብጣዕሚ ዝዳ ከምቲ ቁርብ ንሰምዖ ንበሃል ገዛ ተሰሪሕዎ ከም ናይ ኣክሱም ብጣዕሚስ እቲ ቱሪዝም ዝኾነ መፅዩ ዘጥልለሉ ጽላል ተሰሪሕዎ ብደንቢ ብንክብካቤስ ይተረፍ ከምቲ ዝበሃል ነዚ ጣብያ እዙይ ንኻሊ ይኸውን ስለ ዝበሃል ብጣዕሚ ኣነ ገጅፍ ዕዱል ትፅቢት ኣለኒ ማለት እዩ
ፍሉይ ስራሕማት ትምህርትስ ብዙሕ ትምህርቲ ንረክበለና ካብዚ ማለት እዩ ካብዚ ነውፀት ዘለና ተኣሽሙ ስኢል ካብዚ መዓት ዝንሄ ስኢሉ ተቢሉ ዘሎ ብስንፍና ሕብረተሰብን ተኣሽሙን ስለተበለ ፍሉይ ትምህርቲ ንረክበለና ማለት እዩ
እዋ ነቲ ሕብረተሰብ ዘሎ እዚ ስራሕ ዘይብሉ መንእሰይ ካብ ኮብሎ ዘሎ እዚ ሙዚየም ተተሰሪሑ ተጠቃሚ ናይዚ ጣብያ ዝኸውን ዘሎ መንእሰይ ቀዳማይ ነገር ማለት እዩ
UCLA and the Institute for Field Research work alongside the community as together they traverse delicate socio-political heritage issues.
I guess in Ethiopia, because you have such significant sites with paleoanthropology and stuff like that, and now we're exploring more the historical archaeology aspects. So you just have like a really long human history that like a lot of people are trying to understand all the processes that took place for us to get here and what different types of lifestyles and different types of people have lived. So since there's such a long history, it's really nice to understand within the same region what human processes look like.
It's very exciting to be here specifically because there just has been very little research being done in Ethiopia. So it's basically whatever we find here might be sort of like groundbreaking discoveries. And also archaeologically speaking, I'm just very interested, and also specifically in Trench 1, because digging down here under this collapsed structure here, there could be a potential that we actually find maybe an intact inventory of the room. So that would be very exciting, because I think for this time period, for the pre-Aksumite period, There's not a lot of other examples for that yet. So this could be like really an archaeological sensation or so. At least for me, I was like all year like thinking about this and just excited to see what comes out.
What we're working on here, we're technically working in the pre-Aksumite period. This isn't like developing things like leading into something else. Like this is its own sort of entity. And so we're really, we're working in this time period that we call pre-Aksumite, but it's kind of in the hope of elaborating into something else.
Ethiopia has an incredible history and time depth. And there's of course a huge gap between Lucy and the Aksumite Kingdom. So what was going on? Well, in Egypt I worked in the Neolithic and I looked at early agriculture. And Ethiopia is unique also because of nowadays there are these grains that are grown there that are unique for the country. Teff, which is the grain of which the local bread is made, is a typical Ethiopian cereal. So my interest in early agriculture in Egypt translated to an interest in early agriculture in Ethiopia. And I asked around. People were saying to me, there is no evidence for the late Stone Age or for the Middle Stone Age or even early Stone Age in this region of the highlands of Ethiopia. And I thought that's impossible. If we have out of Africa, they've passed through there most likely. And it's an area that nowadays is very good for agriculture. It was a fertile area earlier as well, even if there were climatic differences. So there must have been population there. So we're out here with a really big team. We brought out the best people to work with us in Ethiopia to address these questions, to address this riddle. These are really the world specialists. We have a survey team that goes out and that looks for everything on the ground. They're very interested in caves and rock shelters because that's where we can find this missing link, these very old remains. They look on the surface to see if they have production areas for flint. That's another extremely important clue to see how early we have people living here and working here. Then we have our excavation team. These are the people who work with the local population, with the farmers who even better are at not just knowing soil but also excavating this soil. And we're bringing a whole bunch of students, both from Europe and America and from Ethiopia, who work with these specialists to understand and to learn what archaeology is all about. We have people who study the animal bones and all the plant remains. We have people who study the pottery and the metal and the lithics, the flint remains. So these are people who can read the pottery, who know how old it is, if it's cooking ware, if it's used for a presentation of very important occasions. It is reading the material. That is the information we're looking for.
For archaeologists, one of the first and most critical steps to protecting the land in northern Ethiopia is to embark on field surveys and collect information about the location, distribution, and organization of past human cultures.
We want to understand how does the Mai Adrasha site relate to the larger region. Mai Adrasha appears in the northwestern corner of the survey area. It's a great survey area. It's a survey area that you'll see in here that has 4 major watercourses. And one of the things that we think we've found already, a pattern, is that these large settlement sites like Aja Ramira here are situated on the headwaters of these streams. Watercourses make up important initial tributaries to the Tigray, and they probably were corridors of movement of people. Tigray and Eritrea are great places to do archaeological survey because you have landscapes that of course are full of all kinds of historical nuances. You have an incredibly long-ranging archaeological record, right from the early Stone Age to today, right? And there's an important archaeological record of the last, century that relates to cultural identity in here, including, political identity and conflict and change and everything. So up to the 20th century, incredible archaeological record, long-ranging archaeological record, but also you have a landscape that is kind of on the edge of semi-arid, so you have great visibility, right? The archaeological record is very obtrusive. You can see it, it's very conspicuous. You don't have to work through, it's not covered with vegetation, especially if we work at this time of the year when the crops have been harvested, right? We have great visibility. So it makes for ideal conditions. You can get a tremendous amount of information from surface archaeology in the northern Horn of Africa compared to other places, just because of the qualities of the landscape.
Time is of the essence for archaeologist Matt Curtis, the survey team, and the IFR students. Together they must survey as much of the 100 square kilometer area as possible before the ancient land is carved up by increased development.
It's an adrenaline rush when you find something that you know is significant. And you may have spent 2 days, out there walking, but when you come upon a site that you know is really important and really interesting, then yeah, that moment of discovery is a lot of fun. We have very early Paleolithic sites you might describe as containing stone tools that would be associated with what we call the Middle Stone Age and the Later Stone Age. Surface scatters. We have rock shelter sites that have nice deposits of sediment and a lot of lithic material, and some of them have ceramic material and faunal material, bones of animals. And particularly interesting are these rock shelter sites with little microlithic tools, which suggest that they may date back into the early Holocene, maybe 5, 6, 7, 10,000 years before present or earlier. We have also these larger ancient village sites that date to what we generally call the pre-Aksumite period or the first millennium BC.
That's a little scraper. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, well, it's two-sided. It's bifacial.
Yeah, it's bifacially flaked though. But yeah, that's a little.
What is this?
Little scraper chopper, like thumbnail size. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Does it open back up there?
Okay, we can archive. Sure.
Yeah, there could be chamber.
Is that bone?
Yeah, it's a bone.
Go to the Explorer. Long bone, huh?
Yeah.
Fragment.
More the distal it's chewed.
Yeah, it's been gnawed up, chewed up, yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if in some of these areas that they could use these as shafts for like priests that were at the church or whatever. Yeah, could have little graves in here.
I think after it was abandoned, it attracted some carnivores to live.
They came in there. And
so the local people would like block it and then
so that they would have
yeah. These are the signs of the carnivores.
Yeah, sure, I agree.
They found several caves, and that's very promising because that's where we can find the earliest remains. They found work areas for flint where the oldest tools were found, where the oldest tools were made. So the survey team looked at the landscape, at everything every trace that is still available and that can even be thousands of years old. We find pottery, that's quite late. We find lithics, that ranges from 3 million years ago to even today people are using lithics. And sure enough, we're finding it.
The archaeological surveys conducted by Matt Curtis and the survey team yield a successful assortment of crucial evidence that proves settlement patterning and relationships between the ancient built and natural environments.
So we've got a whole range of sites from very early Paleolithic sites to the modern period. And that's, for me, very exciting because you get to experience the whole kind of range of human settlement in the Shire plateau here. Where the survey area is. And what's really fun about some of these rock shelters is that they have what we might consider a classic, what is referred to as later Stone Age material of Eastern Africa. So similar in form to other rock shelters from the wider Horn of Africa and Eastern Africa, indicative of hunter-gatherer populations of the Holocene and the late Pleistocene. So little crescents like these here, which are very indicative of that time period, and lots of little geometric microliths that are less than a couple of centimeters in extent, and which are very characteristic of that lithic or stone tool tradition. Lots of little micro blades, in this case made of chert and chalcedony. So you can see this broad time period, what we refer to as the later Stone Age. Very important in this region for understanding the early occupation of this area. You were asking about the significance of these rock shelter sites, that very few of them in the northern Horn of Africa and the Tigray region have been excavated. So we only have several sites where we've had excavations, and so it's very exciting that we have a number of rock shelters that potentially could provide a chronological, sequence of dates for maybe some of the, early occupation of the survey area. So we have a lot of site diversity out there, and we have at least one site where we've discovered this season that has evidence for possible metallurgical work or working with ores, like this material here, or eventual metallurgy for making copper alloy artifacts. Also at the same site we've got iron ore and also iron slag material. They also seem to be processing chalcedony and even geodes, so it's maybe a specialized site. It's kind of exciting. And we even have what are referred to as medieval sites, or sites that date after the Aksumite time, and some from like the 14th to 17th century, 16th century. I guess this project is really important to me because I think it brings together some of the best qualities about archaeology. It's got a community archaeology component. It's got experimental.
When you nap, you get certain traces depending on the tool you're using, and we want to see how they work out with these materials.
Ethnoarchaeological component. It's got regional survey and excavation. It has an interdisciplinary focus. It's engaged with the community. It's got a really important teaching mission for Ethiopian students and American students and international students and graduate students and, very importantly, undergraduate students. All of that combined in this project. So I'm very, very happy to be a part of it, and I look forward to future years.
After the unbackfilling and archaeological survey are completed, it's now time to begin excavation and uncover the mysteries of the ancient world. And what makes working with the Institute for Field Research so unique is that students from all across the world gain hands-on field experience with excavation, survey, documentation, analysis, cataloging, and conservation of archaeological sites and materials. All that's required is an adventurous spirit.
The students that go on field schools of the Institute for Field Research have a great experience. They get lectures every day and they work with the world's top specialists, hands-on research. So they give a real contribution to our research questions and to solving this big riddle.
This thing can turn 360 degrees and we're looking at a perfectly horizontal plane.
Because this is such an underrepresented area, I feel that it's important to expand the archaeological knowledge to others around the world and the history to others around the world, that it's not just all about European history or American history. There are things that go on here, there are things that went on here that are important for us to look at, study, know, and explain to the world as well, culturally. In 5 weeks, I hope to have a more basic and archaeological understanding of what archaeologists do, whether it's research or they're working for like the California State Park System or our country specifically in America. I hope to have a job as a field technician, which would be great. And I hope to have a working knowledge of the country, some of the culture, and be able to go back and speak some Tigray to my family.
So we found a lot of obsidian today in our trench, so we found, that's the biggest piece that we found so far, but we've also found little flakes. Actually, we found like quite a bit.
In June, I graduated from UCLA. I got a BA in anthropology as well as a BA in ancient Near East and Egyptology with a minor in art history. I'm really interested in the past and cultural heritage and how people interpret that or give it different significances, and archaeology is a part of that process because that's how we get a lot of the objects, and the process in which they were found or excavated or brought to people really has a significant impact and like the significance and interpretation they're given, and so it's interesting to be a part of that.
This is the biggest one that we found so far.
We're in Trench 6, which I think is one of the more recent trenches. It's a lot more shallow. This morning we did unbackfilling, and there's a few walls, and we're about to take the tarps off, I think, to see the plaster floors.
That's slag.
Cool.
Nice. And I correctly guessed it.
Awesome. Good job, Julia.
We're looking at a site that deals with pre-Aksumite period, and it's really important that we're looking at that because there's a lot more potential for research in that area, so it's really exciting. Yeah, it's a big deal for sure, and especially coming from UCLA, like we know, or I know, like what big players Professor Vendrick and Professor Bernard are, you know what I mean? And the like research that they produce is really important, especially the Cotsen into like the departments at UCLA. So it's really cool to be working on at such a personal level with people that I've read their articles, I've cited them in my papers. Like, it's pretty cool to like connect that to a face and, you know, a story, and yeah, it's awesome.
Pretty much the entire trench, most of what we find is pottery. But most days we come home with maybe a bag or two. We're coming home with like 6 today.
I love archaeology. It's the only thing I've ever considered doing with my life. Because, you know, if nothing else, at least you're getting out in the sun. I guess the best thing is when you're tunneling down and you finally hit a new unit. You know, you finally find sort of the place where one construction phase, one period of history ends and the next one begins. So far in Trench 2, we've got everything nice and level down there. We've knocked out a couple of walls, found some charcoal in some of them so we can get a good date on them, that's good. And right now we're just tunneling through some excavations to see what we find in there. We're hoping on some animal bones so we can prove it might be some kind of pen. We're not entirely sure what the trench was. We think down in the south bit we've got a little fenced off area that we think was either just a room leading to a staircase or just a pen for the animals. And in the center we've got a big old stone platform that we think used to hold a big pillar. So we're not entirely sure. It might have been some kind of place for some sort of ritual practice. Not entirely sure yet though. I think it's always important to get a feel for exactly how you do archaeology. You know, I feel like I've learned a lot more in the field than I ever did in the classroom. Just working out the procedures for handling things, sorting things, cataloging things.
Ethiopia is awesome. I've never been anywhere like it. I'm in Trench 2. In there we have some of the oldest dates on site, date back to 1200 BC. We've been removing walls to see another construction phase, which could be possibly older than that. In terms of urban spaces in Ethiopia, it's very exciting and unique. I think the best part, is discovering something new. Think about archaeology not in artifacts but in data and in people. So finding a pot might be exciting, but finding a new piece of architecture like a new wall or a staircase is equally as exciting. The beauty about archaeology as well is that you don't know what you're going to find. I'm loving it. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen.
Judging by the curvature, it's got to be a gigantic vessel or maybe just like a plate of some sort.
We found all sorts of stuff, a bunch of obsidian, smaller pottery shards, some bones. I believe we may have found a tooth earlier on. I've learned a lot, which was my goal coming into this. I feel like every aspect of this experience has helped me form some sort of position on which now I know where I want to go with my education, with a possible career in archaeology or anthropology or something like that.
I'm interested in biology and specifically evolutionary biology. I think that I can incorporate that with archaeology. Knowing how archaeology works, it's pretty good already, but also experiencing the culture and knowing how, again, the Ethiopian people live, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, those are the main things. And also the views again. I love the views.
You want the bottom of your camera to be at the same line as this one.
Right now, I'm going to give you 477 top elevation max.
I've been blown away. It's such a beautiful country. It's interesting because not much is known about the archaeology here. You mainly think about Ethiopia. You think about it in like Paleolithic times, earlier times. So you don't really think about it as in like what we're looking now, which is pre-Aksumite and Aksumite period. It hasn't really been explored that much. So being here and being able to be part of this project with Professor Willeke, it kind of is exciting to be able to just be in a totally new terrain, totally new site, a new story for me, because I'm mainly ancient Egypt, so it's quite exciting to kind of compare and see the differences between both cultures. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And Ethiopia, it's a great country, so I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I love archaeology because I spend my time with the materials, with the history of the ancient people, because I would love to speak to those people, but they are not here in person. But through archaeology, it's possible to communicate with them. It's possible to know about their life, about their history, about their environment. So on a side, looking for the materials of our predecessors is a very lively job for me. Everything is buried in the ground. We don't have written documents to narrate this ancient history. The significance is not only for Tigray or just Ethiopia, but it's important for the whole region of the Horn of Africa.
Unearthed artifacts, either small or large, from prehistoric and historic time periods, provide evidence of past cultures. These artifacts serve as a physical connection to our past and show us how human behavior has changed throughout time. Excavation in northern Ethiopia has a short window of just 2 months during the dry winter season. The archaeological team must uncover as much information as possible before the season is over. Together, they work around the clock.
I'm really excited about what's gonna come out here. Sort of concave, so I think that's one of those imprints where there was like a wooden beam or something like that originally, where the mud originally stuck to a piece of wood. And then there's a little hollow, so maybe there was something organic in here, like a seed or something, and then that burned out or so, and that left that hollow. So it doesn't look like much, but I think it's pretty exciting because there's not much evidence for this time period for this kind of architecture so far. So every little piece that we find, can add a lot of knowledge to that.
So yeah, you got the two eyes. There seems to be a nose thing going on. You can see this ribbing. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be indicative of a cobra or if that's some other stylistic device or imprint that was made in it. But snakes are a really strong part of Aksumite oral tradition or mythology. The first king of Axum, Arwe, was legendarily a snake who took sacrifices from the town till he was destroyed by a hero figure. And many of the current monasteries were founded by great priests or saints that were carried up by snakes.
So rather than thinking of an explanation in which we say, okay, all of a sudden we have pottery here, so all of a sudden we have people here, we now are looking in the time depth of those people. They always were here, and they were always in contact with other parts of Northeast Africa. So what we are slowly able to do by very careful research is to show that these people were always here, that they were here before the great Aksumite Kingdom, that they were here independent of any influence from Yemen, because that's one of the theories, that this whole region was perhaps populated from people from South Arabia, present-day Yemen, the Queen of Sheba. No, these people were here, they had their own ways of living, they had their own culture, and we're now slowly unwrapping that.
We have our room, right, that we know is pre-Aksumite, but then that corner of it, that midden seems to be spilling out from another area. It's not associated with our occupation.
Oh, okay.
Right, so there's another house, and I think they're starting to pick it up on the GPR. There's another building to the left of what we're actually digging up that's later in time.
Although I would say, like, for the midden, you'd really have to look at the statistics of the sherds. If it's, say, 20% Aksumite, 80% pre-Aksumite, you would have to date it by the latest thing, right? So the whole thing must be Aksumite. But if you only have the examples of the braziers, or so that being Aksumite and all the rest is pre-Aksumite, then the braziers could actually, maybe be earlier.
The braziers are a larger marker is the thing, but the pottery seems to be quite consistently Aksumite from what we saw.
So it's now getting exciting. All of that is stuff that we want to document, basically every piece in the long history of this building that we're in. It's always a cycle between excavating and then documenting what we have excavated.
He found some obsidian. It's a little dirty, but a sieve. What else? You find? Oh yeah, buttery. Yeah. Thick. Yeah. Cool. Nice.
We're working in Tigray, which is the best excavated place in Ethiopia. And we still barely know anything. You still have the entire Oromo regions, you still have much of the Amhara, you have histories of wandering kingdoms. You have all these places, the history here is really big, Our problem is we barely have people to excavate it. And so it's an exciting thing because there's just so much. I can work 10 lifetimes in Axum. We wouldn't even scratch the surface. This juncture, I think, is the thing that's exciting. Like just the idea of how enormous the history is here, and you see all these monuments and you just keep wanting to know more. You're like, wait, this isn't enough for what we know this place was.
We have a ceramic figurine head. Debate is out whether it's a goat or a woman. And we have a very beautifully polished stone bead. Pottery. They got stuck in the clay, so we're making sure they don't go away with the clay.
From this trench itself, we have carbon-14 dating of about 800 BCE. So starting from there, you have an Aksumite civilization nearby, and we found a few Middle Stone Age around that time area, charred stone tools a couple kilometers away. So you have a pretty stable chronology from the Middle Stone Age up until at least the Aksumite era. So that's pretty significant to try and trace out human history for that long of a period within one area.
I think it's that feeling that really drives you, and I think the fact that people beyond archaeology see it just when they travel to this region makes it something that's, there's something really enormous here.
With 1 week left in northern Ethiopia's dry season, the archaeologists are in a race to meticulously excavate their sites and learn more about the Horn of Africa's ancient past.
So this also burnt clay?
Once they leave, the trenches they excavated will be backfilled and given back to the farmers to grow their crops. But danger of destruction looms, and the protection is left to the Ethiopian government to stop miners who continually look to get more land for mineral profits.
But of course also the location of these charcoal pieces could tell us something about the original architecture. Because that presumably was where there was architectural wood. So that's why, the location of these charcoal accumulations, when looked at, in a map, or maybe we can even sort of model this in 3D or something like that, then maybe this will tell us something about where the original wooden beams were. So this vessel, we found it about 2.5 weeks ago. When we were excavating the stratum that was above what we have right now. It's still all the same unit, because this is still all this kind of very red dirt here, which is still all the debris from this fire that apparently raged in this room at some point. Yeah, and then really exciting will be the content, of course, because being complete like that, maybe it got pretty well preserved. That's why when we get that far, we're gonna just lift it all together in a block with the content, and then it can be excavated in the lab, basically. That'll be another exciting thing, basically what is under the vessel. Is it actually resting on something? Is there a floor there or so?
The archaeologists are producing an incredible wealth of information, and for the local excavators, they profit in both a fair income and a greater understanding of their cultural heritage.
There seems to be a cultural code of putting giant pots in corners. This one's 40-ish centimeters, about half a meter. They laid this dirt on here because this dirt isn't natural, I mean, it's deposited. And then on top of that, they started building this cobble pavement, which was part of the construction activity for the giant platform that held the column. So this was placed by the people that made the column before they even made the column. The only thing that might have been here before that were a couple of these walls. And once they made the platform, the earth floor, which was right under the top cap of the platform, extended out all the way. This rock marks it right here, right to about here.
At least with modern cultures, they tend to put sewer vessels underground or like
Right.
next to like walls, and then that keeps them cold and that helps them ferment slower. That way they don't go bad.
Oh, cool. So then if this is something like that, then people actually built the beer silo before they actually built their house.
Hey, maybe they built it together. They were like, we need a beer spot, so might as well.
And so this whole thing was like planned, like it wasn't just randomly made. There was a lot of envisioning that was going on for the last people that used this site. You can see the cornerstones of that platform, you know, the top of it would have been here. They laid it out, they measured it. It's exactly 160 centimeters squared. You know, we have like our rules in archaeology. Like the first one is context, that's the most important. One of the rules that you learn quite quickly is that people do silly things, but they don't do them for silly reasons.
Well, I'm an archaeobotanist, and the research that we do is very important because what we want to do is to see what people ate, what were they living off. Were they gathering food? Were they cultivating their own grains? Were they cultivating their oil products? Well, we just want to know what were people everyday livelihood. Because that's the basis for your life. You need a house, you need water, and you need food, and we want to know what did people eat.
Well, we're in a couple of villages, like I said, doing ethno-archaeological research there. We've been looking at the houses mainly because we plan to reconstruct a traditional village close to the site where we're excavating now. So we need to know how big the compounds are, how large the houses are, how they're built, what kind of materials we need, how the people use that space that they've got, what they do, where do they cook, where do they keep their storage, whether they have the animals, all that kind of stuff we've been looking at and interviewing the people. Then we've been trying to recreate the technology of a certain tool that we call the Godit scraper. And that's a certain stone tool, and that was a bit of a puzzle, so we've been working on that as well.
We will try to reconstruct the agricultural practices of before. If you have more information about this, you can reconstruct the world around the former farmers, the ancient farmers here. And I'm really hoping we can get a good image out of that. Yeah, that will be very exciting.
The problem in archaeology is that you only find the tip of the iceberg, right? 99% of what there was at one time is gone, so we won't find that again. So one thing you can do is to look at how the people are still living in this area. And of course you can never use it really as proof, but it may give you some ideas and it may give you inspiration to search in the right direction if you want to find out something. And then a link to that are the experiments. So those two sources we have to use a lot, in combination always with the finds, of course. Well, you're helping out to understand what your past was, and the past is still the roots of who you are, right? So understanding the past is very important. Archaeology tells you who you are. And doing it this way, doing it the hands-on way, and learning from other people who've been doing it their entire lives, I think it's a fantastic way to learn stuff. Books and computers are really nice, but we still have to get our hands dirty. And if you like that, then this could be the job for you.
In this, it's half a grain kernel, and I think it's part of a pulse of a Fabaceae, so a bean, of a bean. Let's see. We hit a few samples which held a lot of charcoal, so you can see the seeds floating onto the sea. You could immediately see that there were grain kernels. And when we looked closer, it turned out they are grain kernels from emmer wheat, and we have it from barley as well. Also some flax, there are lentils. So we already have the basis for a good meal. It's there, yeah.
Archaeology in northern Ethiopia wouldn't be possible without directly involving the members of the local communities, state governments, and national government. They are involved in developing plans for a science center and a museum for the children of Shire.
Having a museum in places like this would help you to understand what happened in this area scientifically, and also it helps you to communicate with the people how and why we should preserve our sites and historical materials. I look forward for the museum. I am very excited to be, part of that project also.
We have a dream to build a museum, and I hope the government, the international fundraisers, the UCLA sub-project, and my office and other stakeholders will be involved in the project and to have the museum. So we will harmonize those things. We will have the best museum in Shire.
The future of archaeology depends on the involvement of the community to contribute to research, fieldwork, and spreading the word about the region's spectacular ancient history.
It is sometimes hard to explain, but the first time you get into an area, you look at the lay of the land, you look at what do we have here. You talk to the local population and you say, okay, what is your knowledge of this region? What are your oral traditions? What do you think is important? That very first start of the research is so exciting. You look at the fields, you look at what's possible, you think about, okay, how are we going to tackle this? It's just unbelievable. Now we are studying the past, but everything we do is focused on the future. The future of the community here, the future of the site, the future of the students, both in Ethiopia and in America, the future of the research program at UCLA. It's all linked together. And I think that we would not be good archaeologists if we only were looking at the past. Nowadays you cannot do archaeology anymore as if it's an isolated thing. Archaeology is completely rooted in the community. Everything we do has to involve the community, and the biggest praise that we can get as archaeologists nowadays is if people accept us as being part of that community. And it gives a kind of voice to the community, and that's so important. The best protection for archaeology is if the people who live around the archaeology have a stake in it. We really should give credit to people who live in an area and have lived with antiquities for generations. The community archaeology we are doing in Ethiopia is focused on having a very honest relationship with the local community. Asking questions, not just saying this is what we want, but also asking what is it that you want, what is it that you think is important. So we have this great relationship. What we excavate are things that people use, things that they have had in their hands. If you see the fingerprints in a pot and you put your fingers on it, it's like you touch history. It's an incredible experience, and to be able to share that with people is invaluable. So the work that we're doing in Ethiopia is so groundbreaking. Compared to other regions of the world, we have great results this year and very surprising results. What we found was that the people of 1000 BC in this region were growing wheat and barley. Now that is so unexpected, because we would expect them to grow teff, which is now the staple food in Ethiopia. But no, they were growing other things. The other really important thing that we found this year is several caves and rock shelters. We haven't excavated yet, we don't know what they bring, but this potentially is the link between early hominids and people of whom we find the cities and the towns. These are the people who lived there in the Middle Stone Age and the Late Stone Age. We found a huge industrial area, and industrial, you have to think of stoneworking. These are ancient industries of making the stone tools. It's incredible. Our trend supervisors, our students, our local excavators, our field survey team, our specialists, they've all come together and they have shown that there is this rich history of this region. So we are slowly filling in history. We are slowly giving history to this region. But also on a worldwide archaeological scale, to have filled in this region that people thought was empty, that perhaps didn't have people in the Middle Stone Age, now clearly was inhabited. And what is really important to note is that we are just scratching the surface. We have a lifetime of work in front of us.